It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
All right, welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast podcasted 50 times a year from Kitchen Bench in Kingsland, Auckland, New Zealand. We've hit 49, folks. We've hit 49. We are 98%. Does that work out? I think that does. We're 98%. I've become mathematically obsessed in the last few episodes. We're 98% through the first season, the 2017 season. It started late November. As you'd know, you need to release the show earlier than the set date. The 2017 season released late November. Cessation date today. I'm posting 50 in a second. My guest today for 49, Mr. Chris Chetland. Before I get to him, I'd like to discuss my ranking in the New Zealand pinball community. Met these crazy fellas in 2012. You can catch up with Dave Peck, who owns over 100 pinball machines. Let's go for over 120. Think about that. Think about the physicality of that. Where would you stick him? You wouldn't live where I was. You'd need some serious real estate. So he's got a bunch at his city apartment, as you do. His daughter's ranked as one of the best female players in the world. His daughter is also ranked as one of the best youth players in the world. She fits into both categories currently. But anyway, I digress. We went out to Pukekohe, where it is sensible, if you have the scratch, to have a games room with over 100 machines. And we embarked on our yearly Pukekohe Classic, which ties in with the IFPA, the International Flipper Pinball Association. I'm not making any of this up. Rankings. I'm not sure where I am in the world, but I keep an eye on my New Zealand rankings. Considering I have no machine, so no way to practice, and pinball eluded me from about 99 to about 2012 when I met this amazing community of silver ball aficionados. I'm actually number 21 in New Zealand, which might sound like being excuse me. It might sound like being 200th at Frisbee in New Zealand, but it's an achievement. It's an achievement for me because it means I'm in the top 32, and I'm going to go to the New Zealand Champs in January. I'm going to fight. I'm just going to be honest, I'm just going to compete. I can't really fight. There's some amazing players. There's people up in the top ranks that play competitively overseas, like the Pecks. And funnily enough, like as I say, I found that in 2012, and it turns out since I've sort of got there's a active pinball community in New Zealand who are competitive. It turns out there's been a sort of similar rise around the world of, I guess what you call, retro gaming. There's a big company called Stern who continue to manufacture machines. Rhoda Dave, who I speak of from episode 6, had their latest machine, which is Aerosmith. They've started to release a lot of, they release titles in general, but they, there's a number of them that are classic rock titles, which kind of makes sense considering the market. Dudes, excuse me, dudes post 40. Anyway, it's been such fun, and it's a real highlight on my calendar. We even have these monthly meets. I feel like, because like as I said, I don't have a machine, so it's sort of I sort of feel like both an insider, because they've all become buddies now, but a sort of a very grateful outsider. On that tip, I took a very dear friend, a very close friend actually, Ed Uiti, who I lost contact with for one reason or another, and we've regained contact, and knew he liked his pinball, and I said, come on out to Dave's collection. Which is a bit of an overwhelming introduction to the New Zealand community, because whether or not you're into pinball or whatever, just to see this room is just kind of like, what is going on? this is ridiculous. How did one man assemble this oasis of pop culture, history, flashing lights, gaming, exhilaration and excitement? And it was really quite great watching Edo's eyes turn into saucers and him regress, sort of run around like a kid in a candy shop, which I did, and it made me realize I'm not taking it for granted. Every time I go out there, it's like amazing. It's amazing. How did we get there? Anyway, my guest today is Chris Chetland. If you don't know, now you know, as it were. If you do know, you'll know about cog transmissions back in the day. But whether you do or you don't know about that, what you need to know now is that Chris is actually privy to a lot of styles and flavours and communities of New Zealand music through his ongoing work at Cog Studio, which he originally established in the late 90s, but which now is one of the sort of go-to mastering houses for music. If you don't know about mastering, it's an oft overlooked part of music production and the sort of wider mainstream zeitgeist. So hopefully with some of the questions I ask today, you'll get a bit more of an insight on that. It's a shine and buff from the producer and or artist. It's getting it floor ready for consumption, making it big and bright and beautiful. All right, like the show, Verbal Highs Podcasts on Facebook, Verbal Highs on Twitter. Go, please, to iTunes and subscribe. You can rate it there. There's 5-star options. The only one you're allowed to do is 5. You can leave a comment there too. Over to you, Chris. Lovely to catch up again, and thanks for giving up your time. I didn't realise Chris drove out from the Waitex to be here for this, but he did.
This is Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs.
I'm sure that you will know about microphone placement.
Yep. Not really, actually. I get someone else to do all my microphone stuff.
We're on a budget here. I don't have a mic guy. Put it down a little so I can see your face.
Okay. Yeah,
okay. Hi.
That's it. That'll be fine.
Oh, you reckon that's close enough?
That'll be fine.
Hey, yeah. Some people, people who aren't familiar with them, I've noticed some people get up like it's an ice cream.
Yeah.
And it not how condenser mics are designed, right?
Yeah, but if they haven't used the mic, it's to be expected, really.
I bet you've learnt a lot over the years about such things, eh? Trial and error, a lot of self-taught.
I'm a researcher by training, so I do research, and you ask questions, and you experiment. But yeah, the
internet must have been a huge change for that, because I've joked with a couple of people on the show about the old spiraled, instruction manual compared to being able to watch 8,000 YouTube tutorials on the same thing now.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you would go through the whole, an RTFM guy, read the fucking manual?
To an extent, I always think they're important, and that's, again, I suppose, coming from my background. YouTube videos can be useful, but often I find the written word is a lot faster to deal with.
Right.
And YouTube videos, because a manual effectively has peer review, so it's generally more likely to be accurate, whereas you probably find 60 to 80% of YouTube videos are not very useful or almost counterproductive or just flat out incorrect. So I was checking a few video tutorials out yesterday on something, and it was just like
frustrating when you're just looking for that fix or that answer or that bit of knowledge you need.
It was just like, you should stop doing video tutorials. Often it was the people just going, blah, what up, it's your boy, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. The American things, they all put on these weird radio voices. And then
heaps of those little pop-up windows with info. That's my pet hate, is little speech bubbles popping up with information that you just don't need.
They've just gone to these lengthy diatribes about nothing relevant to the video. I like to get into it personally straight away, and Germans are good at that. They just straight in facts.
I've been teaching a little bit of cultural theory to international students, and there's a guy called Hofstede, and he has all these measures. They're sort of polar opposites to each other, and nations sit somewhere, and unsurprisingly, in direct and indirect cultures, Germans are very much up the direct end.
I'm totally a fan of the German approach.
To close that off, it's funny you say all that, Chris, because I bought the machine recently. It ships with no instructional manual. There's no instructional manual on their website, and so I am only to assume that you are to go through people's crowdsourced. It's effectively, they have official videos up, of course, but I think a lot of their training is effectively crowdsourced.
Right, that's interesting.
It's slightly annoying because I'm with you that despite those being handy, I would like to have the official company. I mean, Native Instruments are pretty onto it.
They
otherwise,
should have a PDF, you would figure, but
maybe I have to dig a little deeper. I'm going to introduce you. What the heck? My guest today is a musician, studio engineer, masterer, which is a word I made up because it's underlined red here, and theoretical biologist. He's one of the founders of the Cog Transmissions label and studio, and still works at the now new location of the Cog Studios, essentially mainly mastering for a wide range of artists. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do various commercial jobs as well, voiceover recordings and production side of things. But what we're known mostly for, I suppose, is mastering. And
and what we'll get to later is such a crazy, such a range of artists and styles. I was thinking you must kind of have your finger on the pulse of where New Zealand music is throughout the years you've been doing this, because you get a little taste of, all these different styles coming through. Where did this all start? Where are you? Are you in Auckland?
Yeah, I'm from Howick.
Howick, okay. These mentions of suburbs and stuff are not loaded for me, being a Wellingtonian. What is a person from Howick supposed to be? The way you said that, you were like, I'm from Howick.
So Howick is in the eastern suburbs, had beaches, white middle class area, and it was pretty chilled. There was always a lot of sort of people into things like metal or alternative styles of music there. Compared to a lot of other suburbs, it seemed. I mean, Howick had a really strong metal fraternity.
It's really analogous to those similar American suburbs, right? School, family. Are you family? Anyone in the family an academic or a musician, or a combination of both?
Yeah, we've got a number of PhDs in the family.
Sisters and brothers, parents,
like cousins, and like grandfather got a scholarship to London School of Economics. And things like that. So, And so were your folks teachers or academics or similar growing up? Mum was a librarian. Dad worked.
It's in the same ballpark.
He sort of bailed out of England. I think partly from memory was to do with the draft, because people in my family aren't into killing people.
That's nice to know.
Fundamentally.
World War II. Or what draft? Sorry? Draft for
the army?
Yeah, for what? For a world war or for?
No, just they used to conscript people in the 60s.
Really?
I think, yeah.
I mean, obviously, I know the history in the States because of the Vietnam War and so on, but I didn't know that in England. It's terrifying.
They had military service, and Dad was he was a really good sharpshooter. He won like Southern England champion, so I think
it's suddenly it becomes this cross to bear, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
So
because I only learnt recently, like just the random awfulness of it. Like that, I didn't realise that you'd be in the States. You'd be assigned, or however it worked, your particular bunch of surnames. Let's say T to Z or whatever. You'd watch a TV broadcast and basically see whether your bunch of names came up. It was a lottery as to whether you went overseas and essentially went on the firing line.
Yep.
That sounds crazy, right?
Yep. It was it was a pretty damaging time to be.
More water, sir?
I'm all right at the moment.
Okay.
I think that sort of time was a pretty damaging time period for the
humanity.
The people that came up, the post-war, there was still that damage, psychological damage from the war, and the aim to control society going, to stop it going back there, and so it was sort of very treating humans like a machine and going for order over chaos.
That's crazy with like a side narrative of kind of like shiny, happy, whiteware 1950s families, everything's good.
Yeah, it's to gloss over the total neuroses and sort of psychopathy that was inherent in the previous sort of 20, 30 years.
My God. And so it sounds like perfect lyrics for your first band, Raw Meat for the Balcony.
Yeah.
So, first off, Billy Connolly fan?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's no fluke. So you guys lifted I think was it a live album of his?
Yeah, it was. So I wasn't in the band when they came up with the name. I was in another band called Tranquil Repose, which was from a Doctor Who episode, which was a place that the Daleks sent. People sent their relatives when they were dying, and so they'd sort of hibernate them in theory, and then you could sort of pull them back and have conversations with them for their last small amount of time. But what the Daleks were actually doing was just turning them into food, selling them back to people, and having a bad simulation of them. So
what happened with that band? That was the first band, and that was an industrial band as well.
Electronic-y, with a little bit of industrial. That sort of fizzled out. We did that stuff, but then with Raw Meat for the Balcony, that just became more of the focus.
Because tell me if I'm wrong, I'm sort of thinking about this on the spot. Like, even amongst the metal community in New Zealand, industrial's always been quite niche-y, right? Is there a big following?
In Howick, there was definitely a big industrial movement. It was really strong, and there was a lot of, I suppose, because Howick was sort of at that time an outer suburb. You had the aspect that there was a lot of sort of cross-pollination or integration amongst genres because there weren't that many people, and you're all in the same environment. So you did talk.
Sounds like Wellington.
And you saw the similarity,
right?
So I think that might have been why Howick was such a good hub for a lot of that side of things. It's sort of obviously genre is just often words made up by journalists, isn't it, to write about something? But they're just abstract identifiers or signifiers.
Right. So what? It's heavy guitar music with a drum machine or
industrial. When I think industrial,
I've never thought about asking anyone for a definition before.
I think more bands like, say, Skinny Puppy or was it Einstürz and Neubauten? Front 242, yeah, definitely. The Wax Trax label.
Nine Inch Nails get in there?
To an extent, yeah. To an extent. On the more sort of poppier side.
But what is it? Yeah, is it programmed beats?
A lot of things, or just industrial type sounds, mechanistic sounds, the way it's programmed. It was, a lot of it came out of those, from what I understand, those cities that were very industrialized, so like Detroit and Berlin, Hamburg.
And there was a guy in Australia. Is it Fetus Productions?
Yeah, Jim Thirlwell.
Yeah, that's
Scraping
industrial
fetus,
kind of stuff. Eh?
Scraping fetus off the wheel.
Yeah, I had an album of his. It was definitely not. I'll chuck that on at a whim. Listening, it was quite out there.
Yeah.
So and so from there, this is an interesting thing. I did a little bit of reading on you. It would only be the polite thing to do, coming over.
Doing some research.
Yeah. Two academics sitting at a table. Two academics walk into a podcast. You had an interesting thing going where you guys would support a band like Sepultura, which Audio Culture spelt completely wrong on their website. They spelt phonetically. But then you'd play the back room of a rave as well at the same time.
On somewhere else. So it meant you could do 2 gigs in one go, which is obviously fun in some ways. Maybe not so much organisationally, but you could get 2 fees as well, or you could do. We liked both types of music, so what's the problem?
And you're supporting Pantera, and I was thinking that the sort of band and crowd they had at the time, did you guys actually meet them backstage?
Pantera were one of the nicest groups of people I've ever met of any. I've done quite a few international supports.
Right, so their sort of front is different to.
Yeah, they when we arrived, they came and said hi. They watched our sound check.
Yeah.
They came and watched our whole set and cheered us on. And afterwards, they came up and said, "Thanks so much. Here's a bottle of whiskey for you. Come and hang out with us." They were really polite. I heard the next time they weren't maybe they were more rock starry, but when we played with them at Logan Campbell,
that's great to hear, man.
Super friendly. That's
really great to hear.
Down to earth.
I think what happened down the track, this is my guess, is unfortunately for Phil Anselmo, he went really heavily down the addiction track, so he probably they were turned into a-holes while all that was going on.
Well, it does change the the biochemistry
Yeah.
and the way your whole brain works. So.
And Sepultura in their prime, that must have been an amazing band to support.
Yeah.
I was big into that thrash sound for a period. And then, what's the significance of 398 Great North Road? Is that a venue come flat?
That was a warehouse flat,
Yeah.
and they were just doing some of the early sort of underground warehousey type dance parties.
Yeah.
But it was dance parties where you would have dance music in one room and then sort of
Yeah.
like ministry in another one, or also it's just anything goes type music and
Yeah.
lots of smoke machines, so you could hardly see your way around anything.
Teenage years?
That was early mid-20s.
Yeah.
That would have been around 94 to, probably 94, 95.
Now I've lived here 10 years, Chris. If I was to go for a walk after this, which I'm actually going to, where's 398? What would be there now?
398 Great North Road. Well, I'm not sure. It's probably been developed, being
Yeah.
Auckland.
But
It
near
was
the-
a pottery. They used to make pots. It was a pot importer for.
But it's this
plant
part of
pots.
this part of Great North Road is around
It's
here.
over the other side
Okay.
of the hill from Kingsland, where we had the original COG studios. We could look straight over and see it.
I've talked to a few people on the podcast about this, looking back on the 90s and that whole, situation and setup of being able to live like that. I think it's a bit of a loss to people that age these days, that there aren't those like creative hub, cheap kind of, as I say, I've talked to listeners who've heard it a few times, but I've talked about the size of my industrial premises rooms in Wellington, and us putting on gigs and parties and stuff. What do you think of how's Auckland changed over that period of time for you?
I think probably the main function of it will be increase of population, which is what's happened in most major cities. So the rents in those central areas massively increased. The rents used to be so cheap; it was like $50, $60 a week, and a lot of places $100 if you were, at the higher end.
But Auckland in general, how do you feel it's, is it the same city it's been for decades? Or?
It's a lot harder to get around, that's for sure. The infrastructure just driving in today is,
You mean we've just got too many people and too many cars?
Yeah, too many cars. We need to really boost up public transport, I think.
But having said that, don't worry, I'm right with you, and I wouldn't own a car if I didn't need to, but I normally bus, but I caught a train the other day, and it was really nice to see that all the trains are packed. But then I realised the reason they're all packed is compared to when I lived in Melbourne and one arrives every 2 minutes, they're all packed because they're so sporadic.
Yeah.
So
I tried to take
I tried to do 40-minute wait in the weekend. I was like, oh man.
Yep.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll get there. I'd love to be in the road cone racket in Auckland. I'd be a very wealthy man because it just seems to be constantly trying to keep up with itself.
Yeah.
And so the move from sort of, a band to actually concentrating on electronic music, when did that happen for you, Chris?
That was happening at the same time as doing the, being on Raw Meat for the Balcony.
Yeah.
Because also we realised that you couldn't really go and record drums. There were 4 tracks on cassettes at the time. So drum machines were a valid option. They were just becoming available. So doing that in samplers. And it was just interesting, like Pat from Raw Meat for the Balcony was a computer programmer.
Yeah.
So he was totally comfortable with that. And it was just something I think with our backgrounds and upbringing, all the members of the band were really open to.
So you didn't lose your mind figuring out the joys of MIDI connectivity?
It was complex. It was really complex in the early 90s.
Sure,
the amount
that's what I mean. Yeah.
It could take you half a day to program all the stuff for a chorus, the drum type stuff. But pretty quickly, that was using a computer.
Yeah.
But going into drum machines, or pretty quickly, things like Cakewalk came in, or the tracker programs. I can't even remember them.
So you were never all analog gear bunged together like Denver. You always had a computer in the mix.
No, we weren't maniacs. No, that was way too... That was... Doing all the synths, I just saw too many of my friends who had lots of synths and drum machines trying to hook them up, and all the problems they had with MIDI, getting it all to sync, and the timing delays. So we just took it from the computer aspect as the hub from the get-go.
To me, you just made me think the height of that mad, if you build it, they will come energy, is people doing exactly what you speak of, but having carted it all up Takaka Hill, and then trying to... I was just thinking about some of the setups I saw up there, no mean feat.
I remember seeing Headless Chickens multiple times with huge racks of all this gear, being the leaders at the time in, bringing in electronic aspects and samplers and things, but they would have problems at basically every gig. It would take them, do breakdowns, and you'd have to wait for long periods of time. So,
because setups are overall way more reliable now, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, totally.
People can actually do it.
Yeah, I listened to an interview with Photech, and I was really, because you know how technically complex his music is. I was really struck when he talked about the process of, he nerded out on actually how he put that album together, and it was just so involved and convoluted and so on compared to embarking on the same project today.
Yep.
Probably put you in pretty good standing for where you are now, though, right?
Yeah, well, it makes you patient.
Yeah, which is a virtue, apparently. I was going to ask you about Denver later on, but I've already touched on him. It was nice to see him get a bit of discussion around recently with the re-releases and stuff. An unsung genius of New Zealand music, you think?
Yeah, totally. I just sent him the tracks from after the Micronism album. He gave us another Mechanism album to do. So, and I just pulled those out of the backups because he didn't have a copy of them anymore. That album, and
good on you, Mr. Archiver. Yeah,
sometimes, yeah.
Because that was his more sort of banging techno project, wasn't it?
It's one of the best electronic albums I personally have ever heard.
In New Zealand or globally? Doesn't matter.
Both,
anyway, so you're gonna? Do you think he might release that as well?
It's up to him. I've sent it to him to have a listen.
Oh, that's so cool, man.
He'll sit and think about it and consider it. That's just his way.
And so, for people listening who don't know, Denver was a basically electronic music artist in New Zealand in the 90s who put together an album that was re-released recently, I think through Mikey's label.
Through Loop.
But the add-on to that story is he found the Hare Krishna faith following releasing that music and then stopped making music. Have I got that right, Chris? Because I'm talking about another man's life.
Yeah, he was getting into it just as that was going through. I remember when we were doing the album, talking a lot about Eastern philosophy.
Yeah.
So he gave me, for doing the mastering of the album, a book on Buddhism. Which is
wow. And so was why did the music stop with the finding the religion? Is that something to do with the teachings of the religion, or is it just that he didn't find doing that compatible with the new spiritual?
I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah,
I think
just
often
one door opens one door.
Yeah, it's just music creates an aesthetic experience, as does certain other things, whether it be like running in certain cases for some people, or religions and particular rituals, and they all have a similar aspects on the brain state wise. So if you're just into that primary brain state, it doesn't really matter what you do, whether it's music or whether it's chanting.
Yeah, you say that, but someone that immersed in producing music, it's amazing that he just walked away from it.
I can totally see it. I mean, I see, I reckon, vaguely similar on that, is that if you have the experience, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's just, that's the shell, or that's the mode of expression from the same fundamental phenomenon.
Yeah, fair play. And as you say, there is the chanting to keep the musical juices flowing.
Yeah.
He was back for a period recently to do a wee show in Wellington, eh? Was it just Wellington?
I think he might have
done
done
Auckland.
No, we're in our ridiculously busy time of year, so...
I'm just in a phase of my life where someone goes, oh, blah, blah, blah played last week, and I'm like, oh, fancy that, up the road, someone who I totally would have gone to, 10 years ago.
We might have been out of town that weekend, I can't remember.
I love this story because I've talked to people about this very idea that when those ridiculous lump sum student loan payments were coming through in the 90s, and some people were like either smoking or drinking them up a wall or whatever they were, some people were responsible, whatever. You guys used your student loan money to actually start the studio, which is, I always talked with people about, imagine if we'd started a business or a thing or something. So talk about that, building a studio from scratch, no previous experience.
Yeah.
Just got on in there.
Got some books out from the library.
Yep.
Yep. So,
On what? Carpentry or...
no, carpentry. I mean, I did woodwork at school, and Paul...
Come on! Was that enough for woodwork?
Oh, I got it hammered into me by my dad.
No
Both
pun
my
intended.
grandfathers were artisan craftsmen,
Right.
metal workers and woodworkers.
So you've got a very practical side as well,
Yeah.
like that. And so what was it up in Kingsland, where you were before you moved, the first one?
Yep.
Yep. And what was there when you got in? Just an empty shell? Or
It was a shoe warehouse,
Yeah.
or they made shoes up there. So it was a total mess and covered in glue, and someone had a total fixation on putting nails into walls and stuff. It was in really bad
Wow.
state of repair and really messy and full of junk. We got, I don't know, probably 20 clean sacks of dust and bits of old, glue and shoe leather and stuff out of there, just even in the first week or two.
I can't imagine that the shoe manufacturing racket in a city would have been going into the late 90s. Had it sat empty for quite a while, had it?
Yeah, I think it was really good until the duty things changed,
Yeah.
and then it started to
The
really
parallel
drop off.
importing and everything.
Yeah, that sort of killed it off. But
Yeah.
the guy owned the building, and he was really into music, so
Cool.
he really helped us out. He was really, really good to us.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's great news. So you got a space for where you guys were at and your age and the scene, quote unquote. Quite a good bloody spot to be in.
Yeah, it's
Kingsland.
just one of those things that, right place, right time, just that chance. Sort of.
And what do you get in there and start doing? Just trying to put albums together, or
Well, first we had to get all the wood, so we went up to the the local demo yards.
Yeah.
There was one at the stables where Universal is now.
Yeah.
So we'd get the wood and we'd chuck it in Paul Hammond's van he had.
Yeah.
He was a really good woodworker. He was really practical on that side. So we'd chuck it all on that, and then we'd bring it back, and then we'd stay out most of the night denailing it with crowbars that our landlord had lent us.
yeah, this is punk as hell, man.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
So, and we'd straighten out the nails and use them
yeah,
as well that we'd pulled out of the wood.
yeah.
So
just trying to avoid budget wherever possible.
Well, we didn't have basic money because we were all either students or on the dole.
Yeah.
So most of the money just went into covering the basic rent
and surely some equipment.
Yeah, I mean, we'd already got some of the equipment with our student loans.
Yeah, yeah. And you get in there, you get the. I'm trying to think what you call it. The woodwork to put the equipment in, the desk holdery thingies in place.
Mm-hmm.
Get it all in there, and then you don't start off wanting to operate commercially, do you? You just want to make good music. And
yeah. The plan to do the studio was so we could record the metal album. We'd done our first one and spent probably $7,000 on it at the time, which is probably equivalent to about $12,000-15,000 at least.
Yeah, right.
Now, and we're like, well, we spent student loans on that as well.
On getting someone else to master it,
to mix it, to record it, master it. So, and it was like, well, that's not financially viable, so we're going to have to do it ourselves. And we were getting more into the electronic side of things, so we figured we'll have a blast at doing it ourselves.
So you guys are the performers and the engineers, essentially.
Yeah, you had to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just a thing you had to learn. We couldn't pay anyone to do it.
What do they say? Necessity breeds whatever it is.
Yeah, it's the mother of invention.
The mother of invention. Yeah. And then from there, I don't even know what year we're in now. 96, it feels like. 97?
Probably 97.
Yep. And so it's not long after that, Chris, that COG becomes quite the well-known label around New Zealand. How did you go from straightening the nails to being on the map, as it were?
So we put our first release out. Well, we did one AK-97 that Nick Meikle managed to get a $2,000 Creative Communities grant for. And so we put that out with some of the Hamilton crew. We helped out Nick and the other Nick Wilson, really coordinated that. So we put that out. That was the first one, and we thought, we can do this. And so it was probably 8 months to a year later that we put out the first COG release, Transmit, which was December 12th.
What kind of music?
It was a mixture of sort of old school psytrance, dub, breaks type stuff.
Yeah, because you were a psytrance guy for a period, eh?
Yeah, but more on the well, I like the sound and
Yeah.
things like that. I mean, it was definitely way different to what it is now.
Well, how's it changed now?
Now it's become more like video game sound effects, as I hear it, with big pounding kick, and it's a lot faster. Whereas in the earlier days with the likes of Dragonfly or was it Mitsura? Yes, Yoshi Suzuki's label and things like that. It was a lot more.
Yeah, I'm trying
musical,
to remember names.
more,
I had a flatmate really into it. Yeah,
more about riffs and things like that. So
it was kind of analogous to classical music. A lot of some of the composition back then, wasn't it?
Yeah,
yeah. But you guys eventually discovered more of, I guess, a what would you call a traditional dance sound. The Algorithms comps, weren't they quite big for you? They were house music compilations.
Yeah, they were.
Right?
Did we do one in the first year? I think we might have. Yeah, that was sort of housey, and we were just all reworking it out because a lot of the genre.
But how did you find all those guys? It was just like it's Auckland, it's small.
Yeah, you just contacted them, you just met them at parties, and you're hanging out. So, and we had the plan to do. Yeah, we realised that we couldn't put out an album and then wait 6 months to be paid by the distributor. That didn't work as a model, and that's what everyone else was doing. And
so you use the theory of increasing returns by complex systems theorist
Brian Arthur from University of Ann Arbor.
Okay. Tell everyone about that.
I mean, that's because I'd been doing stuff to an extent in complexity theory at uni.
Yeah.
You learn these things, and again, just ways that you approach things in ways that nature does it, or that complex systems do it effectively. So you just import those rules into the standard business model, which was very much you have to do it this way, step, 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 and it's like, let's make it non-linear.
So how does that relate to the basic rules of nature in terms of let's put a CD out at the gig?
So if you put a normal CD out, you put it out, you'd wait. Yeah, you put your energy into it, you'd have to wait for a long time, and then that would feed back.
For what? For money to come back?
Sale, distributor, 6 months later or whatever, a payment feeds back the money, and then you can continue the cycle. So I remember just lying on my bed at one stage and woke up one morning, and it was just like, oh, of course we can use this. So basically we did the thing where we created the album. Yeah. We organised with Software Images at the time. Could have been PMI. But Software Images, the CD pressing plant, a credit account that we could get it pressed, or we'd send it in to get pressed. 2 weeks after sending it in, we'd have a party organised that you got the album with the door admission. So really you were coming along, you were getting a party, but getting the CD with it. So it got a whole load of CDs out all in one go. Yeah. And we were getting more from doing that than return than we would have from a distributor as well. So all the artists could get paid. I was
thinking that as well. You get a bigger piece of the proverbial pie.
And we'd have enough money to pay off the CD. So we'd do the party on a Friday or Saturday. On Monday we'd have the money. We'd go pay Software Images. Would come in, and we just kept on leapfrogging that way. But the main thing of that was really to get, we figured if we were going to sell CDs, we might have a little bump of some sales, and then it would slow right down, and then we might get the odd bump as we did gigs. Whereas if we could just saturate, do a big blast of saturation out to cover, people will create awareness, and they associated it with the party.
Right.
So it built up the, gave them a good aesthetic experience. Yeah, and it's sort of, yet again, just using as many feedback cycles to build it up, so suddenly people realised that there was an electronic music movement, even though it wasn't necessarily that true at the time. Yeah. It gave the perception that it was, so it became
so
true.
that thinking about that theory in relation to how you distribute the CDs actually did a whole lot of things that were effective for what you guys were trying to do.
Because it was a big movement against electronic music at the time. Being told that electronic music had nothing to do with New Zealand creative culture and we should stop doing it, directly to our faces. That was one of the people from Creative New Zealand.
Right.
So, and we were just like jaw-dropped and was like, okay, we'll just forget about that. I mean, they came around over time.
It's happened, eh? The same thing happened with hip-hop 10, 15 years earlier and, probably actually not even 10, 15 years earlier.
You usually know you're on the right track if people... if certain people tell you shouldn't be doing it and that it's an offence to their version of
That's
what's
right.
going on.
I feel like it's like the John. You're sounding like John Lydon all of a sudden. That's right. If you have to offend people, or it's not working.
And you see that also in academia with so many of the classic papers that came out. They get told they're madness, or it's totally not what should be going on, and they'll get rejected in the peer review process. So
academia is riddled with conservatism, or kind of a fear, or a
It's a human condition. Yet again, it's a deeper level, I think.
I'd like to talk a bit more with you about academia later on, but the journal mafia thing really bothers me. I have very intelligent friends who aren't in the hallowed institution, who can't download a frickin' PDF of an interesting study, and I don't think that's the way. I don't think that's the way information should be. How do you feel about the open source versus?
It's good. I understand that publishers need to cover the cost, because being an editor of an academic journal...
Cover the cost of what? The writers aren't paid. It's digital. Peer reviewing's part of an academic tenure, so it's covered in the...
Yeah, but just even the formatting thing, so they probably do all rightish. But, I mean, from my side, if I need to get a paper that's not... downloadable from the university, I just contact the academic and ask them, and they're usually stoked, and then you can set up a dialogue with them.
Yeah, so that's a good idea.
I'm really into the personal
but
side of
I'm
things.
saying for a lot of my friends who haven't gone that far in their in study, maybe they wouldn't think, it's like it's not. It's still, I think, there's a bit of it. I have the option to publish open source, and I think I'm going to start doing that. Like, actually, to their credit, a lot of the journals are now saying they actually now are starting to have a tick box saying, "Are you prepared for this to be open source as well as closed on off?" Yeah,
I like the idea if it can, cover, the cost or keep the particular system going. I mean, university systems, lucky in that, people are on tenure, blah, 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 whereas the music industry, where we saw what music effectively becoming open source did to...
I just think, I don't know how much you know about it, but I get covering costs, but it's actually the amount of profit they make from what they charge different unis is phenomenal. It's actually a really lucrative business. As I said to you, I jest, run by effectively crowdsourced authors,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's probably a relevant point. I'm going to look into that a bit more now.
Yeah. Oh, there's a great article Russell Brown posted up. It's actually the only reason I even thought about it from that perspective, was an article he posted where someone wrote about that very thing. I'll try and fish it up for you and flick it through in the next few days. So the Creative New Zealand, the person at Creative New Zealand, is he or she still there?
No. I mean, he sort of apologised.
I know.
Later.
I'm on the wind up. Someone high up at BFM said to Mikey, this dance music shit will never last.
Yeah.
When Mikey was starting to play it on his breakfast show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now, like hip-hop, it's one of the most widely bitten on genres in the pop world, right?
Yep.
Don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
What other influences in the pop world, in the big pop world, are there these days, aside from, broadly speaking, dance music and hip hop? There's not a lot else in there now.
The Latin thing's the big thing coming through now.
Yeah. Are you hearing it coming through local artists here?
Heaps.
Fantastic.
It's going to be the next big wave, and I think that will pull in, along with it, world music. A lot more of the world music aspects. That's starting to just bubble through, I think.
I had Toby Muir over. I don't know if you know Toby, but we just started talking about culture and assimilation and those sorts of things in Auckland at the moment, and then we both talked about how we'd love to see like a all nations of Auckland version of Notting Hill Carnival. And so with you here and talking about what you just talked about, music and style wise coming through in Auckland, like I'd be really curious what's happening in the Chinese and Indian communities here music wise. We're just so cut off from it.
We've been doing quite a bit of stuff for...
There's got to be some funky Bhangra stuff going on.
We've been doing a few works for people from like Mumbai and
Punjabi
region.
But what about local? Local,
local people.
You have been,
because they're sending it back to especially the UK and back to India as markets, but they live here and.
Wow! So you are privy. You are privy to that's really
to
interesting.
An extent. As if we get every week or so, we're getting asked to do a job for Bollywood style or Indian style music. The Punjabi stuff, the rhythms and stuff.
So funky.
And you get to have really good chats about how all the different regions have got all their different specializations.
Have you seen someone play are they called tablas? Those drums that look deceptively simple to play, and they're so. Do you reckon they're simple?
No,
they're multi-layered and complex to get those sounds out of, right?
Yep.
Yeah, beautiful instrumentation. So travelling back to the 90s, as we often do on this podcast, Cog blows up, dance music blows up around the same time as well. But then there's this weird phenomena commerce-wise where all these big companies are throwing money at anything vaguely alternative, What was it like being in the midst of all of that? Was that... I just put that third thing into the mix.
Do you want to qualify what you mean by alternative?
Things like BFM started getting a lot of money thrown at them, and it used to be hard to get a $50 out of anything other than local businesses. Suddenly, the alternative kind of became mainstream. I know what you mean by the word alternative. I mean, you kind of know what I mean. Like
when you say BFM,
like quote unquote youth culture was suddenly very saleable, and I'd imagine that you guys. It affected you in the middle of all of that.
And we were really closely associated with BFM and really strongly supported by them. That was fundamental to what we were doing. George FM was only just starting up. Then they were really small. I remember having a meeting when they were just getting it going with Damien and Thane. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I remember. Sorry, I cut you off. Because I have a great memory of you and that we'd met at the gathering a few years earlier. I'd come up to do the George FM breakfast show. That's right, folks. I was the first ever George FM breakfast host, and you gave me, and I found it the other day. It's one of the few CDs I've held on. Lewis's very special unmixed version of Algorithms.
Oh, right.
So I could play the tracks separately on the show.
Yeah.
Anyway, so back to you're in the midst of that. BFM were really supportive. Where were we going with that? Can you remember?
What was actually happening where people started throwing money at the alternative things like BFM, they started getting more advertising. I mean, they would do their private functions, which became huge, and their Albert Park gigs, which was great.
Did it? Okay, so it didn't. Okay, so it doesn't sound like you were like, "Wow, we can do anything." And then, actually, what did happen? I didn't know till today that the label side of it, I think, in your words, started to fall apart around 2003. Yeah. It's unfortunate. Such a good run. What happened there?
Too many factors. Copying. Reducing resources.
Copying. You mean the burning CD phenomena?
Yeah.
Really hit you?
I mean, that just hit everything. You saw the number of studios closed down within a couple of years. Yeah. And of course that happened for electronic styles of music way before most other styles, because the people were digital natives and tech savvy. Yeah. So there was all those aspects of the way it changes. So
where do you sit? Because I see you as someone with sort of like, you've got quite a punk aesthetic in a lot of ways, but then you've got, you've been in the music industry a long time. Where do you sit with the kind of ethics and economics of piracy? It's a big question, eh? But,
Well, there's a couple of ways to look at it. I see a lot of my friends who should be earning, enough to support their families with the levels of sales and media profile they have that can't. And I don't think that's fair.
No.
When you see people with well-paying jobs copying music and laughing about it.
Yeah.
So I definitely take a strong.
You're on the front. You're on the front line of what's going on.
I work with these people, and they're just saying how they're finding it hard to cover their bills or support, look after their children properly. And it's because people are copying, and they don't. It's that whole human thing of it's one step out of sight, so they consider it's all right. It's like buying a pack of meat at the supermarket rather than killing the animal. They're not prepared to kill the animal themselves.
Chris. Yeah. Right. So the streaming services, to me, that's just the music industry finding another way to rip off artists, because I've got students who have these cell phone plans worth next to nothing, and that gives them access to the entire history of music ever. Yep,
exactly. I think.
What do you think about streaming services?
They're starting to pick up a bit more that artists are starting to make some money from them, and that's useful. But also, physical sales are dropping off. Really a lot. Talking to people in the know, they say it's finally picked up. We've probably hit the bottom of the dip.
Yeah.
But if overall the total income's about 40%. When you adjust for inflation of what it was in 2003 from the music industry, you can see why the artists are finding it hard.
But even you're saying with sales picking up and stuff, well, not sales, sorry.
Yeah, so if they pick up
streams,
if they
pick up, of me.
If they pick up 2%, 2% when you're still down 60%, so 2% to 40%, it's still.
No, that's what I'm saying. Is that this is how I see it. I see it that again quite reductive, but that Napster essentially approached the record companies early on to try and work something out, and the record companies were very combative about it, didn't really know what to do over a period of years, and now it feels like, you know, this whole new way of doing things isn't going to go back ever, you know, full stop. That to me the record companies have just figured out a new way to screw artists and take the most they can through those deals with streaming services.
That might be the case with the majors, but I think most independent. I think as much as I think the artists are in problems because of piracy and the streaming models, I think the streaming people should pay a whole lot more, and it should be legislated correspondingly to do that. And
so you're putting it in the users. That's interesting. You're saying the user. Well, should be the user pay more. It should be the company.
Well, one of the problems is perhaps say with the Spotify model is that let's say $10 comes in, and let's say they pay $1 to the, or let's say they pay $5 to the artist.
Oh, come on, $5 to the artist? Wouldn't it be like 40 cents or something? I don't know.
Let's just take it as a theoretical model.
Okay,
so say they pay out that much to the artist, and the other $5 goes towards their investors. Okay. In the previous model, pre-streaming, that money would come in, $5 would go to the artist, the other $5 would go to the label that would then invest in future recordings, because they had a 1 to 10 ratio roughly of success, the ones that would make money and pay for the others. So that model's gone because that money now goes to independent investors. So I think there's a fundamental shift in the production
supporting
cycle
and nurturing of talent coming through.
So I also see labels being in major problems. If I feel sorry for the artists, I feel even more sorry for the labels, because the artists get publishing. Not the
huge labels, or just regular labels?
Regular labels. I'm not so privy to how the huge labels are doing. I've a look at their stats. But this is from talking to lots of labels and being relatively okay with numbers and stuff. Is that artists still get publishing, artists still get gigs, so that buffers them to an extent. A label's expected to pay for the master recording, which is never going to recoup these days. So the people doing these labels are really sacrificing themselves hard, and I think they're actually at the bottom of the barrel from what I'm hearing.
Well, you're the one who'd be hearing it. So I'll put this to you. Perhaps I really liked how you talked about, the guy with the person with the high income sort of laughing at how you can just get everything free now. Do you think perhaps that we're sort of sold this, not we us necessarily here, but the public now has been sold this, go to live gigs will save it all. It's almost like, piracy, etc., is just here to stay. Keep doing it. Go to live gigs to support. Do you think there's going to be a crisis in music and creativity with the business model in the next few years, or people will just?
I think it's probably gone through its worst, just from what I've been told from people I trust on that. That being said, the realistic factor is that, sadly, unlike accountants or real estate agents or, a lot of people in business, musicians are going to do it, will sacrifice themselves regardless. I see it every week.
Totally.
Because music creates particular experiences for people that they feel they can't not do it. It's part of their inherent makeup, and to not do it is really tricky, especially when they're doing it all the time. I mean, people filter out over time and then go, I'm not doing it anymore. But especially for when people are in their 20s, it's such a strong drive that...
Interesting. So you reckon it's particularly strong for people in one decade of their life?
Probably in teens as well. But it drops off, especially, when other realities, like if you have some kids. I think, the fact... I don't know whether maybe it's just people just give up on getting houses in Auckland now, but when people used to get a mortgage, and especially now, they don't have time to spend on that. So I think, it is problematic. But, while people are in their teens or 20s, they're going to sacrifice everything for the 0.1% chance of success.
Yeah. So speaking of real estate, how's the Waitakere? The photos online look spectacular. Has it just been a huge change in headspace and everything since being out there compared to Kingsland?
I've always preferred being in trees and, away from concrete.
You got a local tui or two or 100?
Yeah, we've got them and geckos and skinks and keraru, centipedes. We've been doing big trapping missions, getting rid of all the mammals on the Titirangi Peninsula.
Nice. Well, all the residents getting together and doing it. How do you... I think I saw you post something about that, looking for non-poisonous ways to do it.
Yeah, we're using the good-natured traps.
Yeah.
The rat ones are good, and Tim's traps. So we've got some good
So what do you end up with in the trap? A dead rat, but that hasn't been poisoned?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Oh, how do they work? They just go in and...
It's basically a bolt gun that goes into the back of its neck when it goes for the lure, so it's pretty quick as well.
Yeah. And what numbers... I didn't expect we'd go down this route, but I'm really interested in this. So what were the numbers like? Because rats are like, once they're there, right?
We probably get about 6... At the moment, we're getting about 6 rats or mice a week.
Yeah. At your property or
on
in the
our property
area?
alone. Yeah. And, I could... It's made a massive difference for possums. We don't really hear possums much now, but I was getting 1 a week for a while.
So doing anything with the... Were you making lots of hats? Making possum hats or anything?
No, we've got a possum graveyard. I mean, they're such beautiful creatures. It's really sad being a vegetarian. It's but I know what they do to the forest. I've seen it.
It's interesting you're saying they're beautiful creatures. It was sort of like here, ish, because when I lived in Australia where they're native... their demeanour and everything is just so different because they're in the place they're supposed to be in. Mm-hmm. They're a little more aggro here. It just feels like they're not in the right spot they're supposed to be. And then the question would be with, like, I guess somewhere, I'm trying to think whether it's Soames Island or somewhere where they've actually successfully removed everything. The problem or the issue you guys would have next is you're still attached to the rest of the isthmus. So how do you, if it becomes completely predator free, how do you stop stuff coming back in?
You just keep at the perimeter. I mean, the ecologists know how to do all that.
Yeah.
There'll be support, but it's just about keeping on going until you get them past such a such a low level that they can't even find each other to breed. Like one of my friends was part of the team that wiped out all the possums behind Huia, in those Huia ranges. When Doc went through and did the tests afterwards, they didn't find a single possum. So they're doing a really good job on it.
And so this is just a local community initiative, not a local council initiative. That's so cool. I've been talking about community a bit on the podcast lately. I just see that as a metaphor for a whole lot of other things in terms of where you live.
You can move a bit faster when you're doing things amongst the community. Council processes. It's they're set up to stop change, not initiate change, pretty much.
I was talking to someone who wasn't from New Zealand the other day, and I realised I didn't know the story well enough about the whole mammalian issue in New Zealand. Now, was it that we were part of Gondwana land and we snapped off? Yeah. But this is where I couldn't get the story out properly to him because I didn't know how to relate that to the fact there were no mammals. Did there just happen to be no mammals on our corner when we snapped off?
Mammals hadn't really evolved.
They hadn't evolved.
We came through around the Jurassic. I think it was Jurassic period.
Yeah.
So that was 125.
So birds and lizards was it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the bats came over. The birds would have probably flown over as well. I would say.
Yeah.
Because when birds first, the proto-birds came in the Jurassic period as well.
Yeah.
So maybe, but after the big Cretaceous event. Probably a lot of it just got repopulated.
It's so obvious and so fascinating, and I didn't find out about it until later in life, why the kiwi, etc., don't need to fly. It just makes so much sense. Nothing around, gorge on the ground.
Yeah.
Do you have you noticed the wildlife picking on up since you put this program in?
The last year, yeah, definitely. Yeah. We're seeing the native centipedes starting to come around that usually get smashed by the rats.
Wow.
Because they're really cool. You don't get bitten by them, ideally. But
are they big?
Yeah, they're about... You can get ones about 20 centimetres.
Well, I grew up in Wellington, and a tui being around... And I was there... I lived 22 years, whatever it was. I can't remember when I first left. But there were no tui in the middle of Wellington. And since they've had that... a bit different to eradicating mammals, but same line of thinking. I don't know if you know, they've got a big inner city bird sanctuary there now in Karori.
Yeah.
Every suburb now has tui. It's amazing.
Yep.
And a bunch of other birds. They're just what I've noticed, because where I was house sitting, one would come right up to the house.
Yeah, well, you just have those little islands effectively for them, and then it can
these projects
feed into
really
the rest
work,
of them.
It's like, it makes me really optimistic compared to all other stuff we hear about the planet.
Yep.
So I don't think we capped off the label. Finishing on up, you got to a point where you not only had Cog Transmissions, you had weren't you working with P Money with his label as well?
Yeah, we always worked with lots of people. We helped out on the initial things on the hip hop. We were working with Jacob as well on their sides of things, on the post rock. But basically, everyone
great band.
Everyone up there was into most styles of music, which is great.
Did you take a period of that? I think let's say it was 96 to 2003. You were just flat tack. A lot of stuff happened. You won a lot of awards. A lot of artists coming through. Did you take just a wee period of before you embarked on your next adventure, or
I don't know, just
because you just that's when you went fully into the world of mastering, wasn't it?
Yeah, and we were doing a lot of stuff in for ads, composition for them, which was that was a pretty good time around then. Yeah, to do that side of things, because
there were ads with budgets then compared to someone selling a vacuum cleaner for 20 minutes now on prime time.
Totally,
right?
Yeah, it was a totally different world.
Yeah,
so yep.
Yeah. Are you self-taught with mastering and audio in general?
Yeah.
Yep. Never done any courses or any... No. Yeah, amazing.
But I trained as a researcher, so, it's just all the same things with different front plate.
Yeah. What makes a good master? There's a question you've probably been asked many times before, but I'm genuinely interested.
Trick's not thinking.
Trick is not thinking.
As soon as you put a thought between you and what's going on...
Yeah.
You cloud the experience, and you're there to deliver the ultimate realization of the track.
Yeah.
There to capture what the artist has created, but also place it in the best and easiest fit into the mind of the audience.
Yeah.
So if you're starting to put your own thoughts in between it, you miss the you miss the moment. You miss the subtlety that's required. You've actually just got to be that thought.
And so, how does that translate on a practical level? Like, you mean you're just using your ears and trying not to...
You don't think, what shall I do? You'll have reference tracks that you'll go to, but you just get the feel, and you just go with the pure experiential nature of it, rather than, I have to do this. The trick is to totally make it feel, and as soon as you find yourself thinking, you've got to not. So
for anyone who doesn't know, you've got, traditional mixing, which... can be done by, and I guess with home recording technology and so on, that might be the artist or an engineer these days. But mastering is, correct me if I'm wrong, really just about getting the record to sound as kind of big and...
It's just a glorified makeup artist.
And you're shining it. Yeah,
yeah, you're just going...
Hey, don't sell it short though, because, I've heard people say that, it takes decades to really...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, and you need like $100,000+ worth of gear, really, to do it.
I heard Angus McNaughton on Radio New Zealand talking about it. I was fascinated. I didn't realise that, again, it's obvious when it's put into your head as an idea, but that remastering projects are often just about, well, we didn't have this technology then, so we're going to make this album sound like this now based on what we can do now.
Yeah, but also you've got to represent the zeitgeist of
the original
where it
time.
Came from.
Yeah.
I'm really...
Have you heard some ghastly remasters?
Totally, yeah. And I mean, I helped do some of New Zealand's classic albums a few years ago, but it was very much about respect that moment. Otherwise, you're trying to dress it up in clothes that don't fit.
Yeah.
So while there's certain things you can do, say, for the top end or bottom end, or smooth a few things out, get rid of some distortions that might have occurred as a mistake.
Yeah.
I'm very much of a keep it in the spirit of the time.
Yeah. It's interesting. But give it a wax and a polish, but don't make it sound...
just show it off in the best light of what it is, not what you want it to be. Again, it's not about putting your stamp on it.
Yeah. I was thinking about that today. Like, almost, you can't be another member of the band or whatever. Can you?
You've just got to be the overview. You've got to be. You've got to hear how all the band hear. You've got to hear how the engineer hears, and you've got to hear how the audience hears. Yeah,
but you said don't think about it and stuff. Surely a part of that is talking to the band and talking to the engineer.
Yeah, but then it's just about but that's. You get the experience, just from seeing in their eyes when they talk about music, you get the cues, and that gives you, because every time you do that, like your mirror neuron system picks that up and you get an experience of that.
So there's a sort of psychology aspect to it as well.
It's about half psychology. Anyway. There's certain things when you know the style well enough and you've worked with people, and that as soon as you hear it, you go, okay, it's going to be this or that. And that's what experience gives.
And then I guess you also even the sort of social tropes of different genres. Fans and so on, that when they turn up, you kind of, different subcultures and scenes and stuff quite
cool.
well.
And then it's about explaining to them the two different aspects of the brain that you experience music with. One's the melodic aspect, and the other one's the tonal balance of it. And in mastering, you're dealing with the tonal balance, not the melodic aspect. So that you'll say, give me some references, and they go, I really like this track by this band. And you go, why do you like this track? And they go, oh, it's a really good riff. That's not what we're listening for.
What do you like the sound of? And how long does it... I mean, I guess it might be a piece of string question, because you get tracks in various levels of completion, I guess. But how long does mastering a tune generally take you?
It depends.
I actually have no idea, I realise, with that question. Is it hours or days? Or
It really depends. I mean, it might take you half an hour to an hour if, I said it depends. Like, the first rule you go into with mastering is don't touch it if you don't need to. So if you've got a really experienced engineer, they might give you the track and you just go, cool. Put it through the gear, and you might do what you could be done in 5 minutes, but you're just there as a double check for them, because so they don't double get themselves and go, that's right.
You're signing off the job.
But sometimes that might take you an hour and a half on that track, because you everything you'll go, okay, let's try this. Let's see if we can make it, even better, and or just get it to represent
that
fascinates
me so much.
And so you'll go through, and you might try for an hour and a half, and you go, no, it's actually right. I got one album from a really experienced engineer. It was basically perfect. It took me a day and a half, 2 days to do, and in the end I was just doing transformer saturation aspects on it. But everything I tried, I was like, no. Nah,
I was going to say, so you took it out in all these directions, and go and have a cup of tea and scratch your head and come back in and go, actually, we'll put it back where it was.
Exactly.
And do you have clients out with you sometimes while you're doing it? Yeah. And so they sort of get to hear it. They get to hear it increase. And
usually it drives them a bit crazy, because we're doing little half dB changes that it takes years to get attuned to be able to hear those things, really.
You mean they think, what the fuck's he doing?
Yeah, just going, you're like this or that, and they go, I can't tell the difference. And I'm just like, you sure?
Yeah.
So, but also because you're often switching relatively high speed between their track and any references you also might be using, because you've got you've got to switch really rapidly, because otherwise your brain's internal EQ adjusts. So you're doing high-speed switching, which drives people crazy as well.
Your brain's internal equalizer.
Yeah, it takes about 250 milliseconds to kick in. Probably the longer you've been doing it, the faster it goes as well. So
now, somewhere I read or heard that, and I sort of passed us by just before that. That someone was saying that a good engineer might be good 10 years in, but it really is a lifelong thing where 40 years in you're at a level. Do you think that you kind of you've this is a terrible unintentional pun, you've mastered it now, or do you see it that way, that it'll just
you keep on getting better. You hear every year you hear the stuff you did before and you go, I could have done that better. But it's like anything. It's like writing is exactly
totally
the same. And other people, most people might not notice the difference, but you will. And it's just like fitness.
After going through before I started my masters, when I did my postgrad, I just it was my. Doesn't matter. Anyway, at some point where I had a supervisor, I struck a woman who said, Lewis, you're a particularly good writer, but then she was a particularly good proofer as well. So she actually brought me up to this whole
Yep.
other level. And I read an article I got published in Remix recently that was from only a couple of years earlier, and I was like, oh dear God.
Yep.
You know, it's just like,
Yeah. I was talking to one of
who agreed that would be published? Yeah.
I was talking to one of the professors I work with last week, and he was saying he's in his mid-late 60s, and he was just saying how still, he goes, writing just takes so long to get good.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm still working at it.
Yeah.
And he publishes in Nature and Science and gets front covers. So it's
Wow. I mean, I hate to be, I don't know what the word is, I it's not a snob, but I've got my writing to a point now where, I guess like badly mastered music or badly anything, I can't believe how much poor writing there is out in the world.
Yep.
Even in quite, prestigious, well, not prestigious, in publications that should know better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Just a blunt creed. But I guess, there is just so much writing now, because as well as imagery, we're such a screen-based culture, right? That you're going to see a lot of varieties of writing.
I always think the peer review process or some form of it is useful to just, get those things up a bit, because if people are struggling with that, to have someone, as you said, a proofreader equivalent is I help people with that side of things as well, especially people who English isn't their first language, and go, what about if we restructure the sentence this way, or we change this around, or clarify?
No, she taught me so much. It would be quite comical sometimes. I'd come back to her and go, what is wrong with, what do you mean there? This is going against everything I know. And she'd be like, no, whatever it was, you used a semicolon where you should have used a comma, or just tiny little things I thought I'd had right all these years. Yeah. Because if you think you're pretty good at something, you can be a little bit defensive when someone starts to point out all the holes in it. I remember
getting back my master's thesis and my supervisor going, it's really good. It's written really well, and getting it back and it just covered in red of changes. Right. And just in there going, what?
I'll give you, this is to Jackie's credit, my supervisor, not mine, I think. Is that I got my master's back with like a short list of things like just semicolons and stuff that needed changing. Yeah. It was a real tribute to our collaborative effort.
Nice.
I've learnt a lot about, that taught me a lot about the way different people approach things, that supervisor process, because I had a really quite dysfunctional one before that, who someone else actually spotted the relationship wasn't working and swapped me out for a new person.
Cool.
You've got to be altruistic in that role. You've got to be, you can't attach your ego to it. Yep. You can attach your experience and your expertise and your, do you see what I mean? The difference there, because it can be quite a power imbalance of a setup. Did you have good supervisors?
Yeah, I had one that was totally absent.
Excellent.
Yeah, just took off to another university.
I think they get their 2 or 3 hours a week of justified of their full-time work for you being on their books.
And he just bailed on all the students. So that was But I had some really good ones.
Good.
As just ones that, again, all you need often is encouragement and, what about look at this or that. So,
because talk about that, Chris, all these years into the music industry, you decide to go back to tertiary study. And I don't know where you were. You finished a undergrad and you started a master's. How many years later?
I was doing sort of 2 masters, so philosophy and biology.
Was it biology back in the when you first did your undergrad? Or
I did both. I did a quadruple major. Yeah, yes, you do.
How long did that take?
4 years.
Oh, okay, that's all right. Shit, that's quite good. Everyone should do a quadruple. It's only an extra year. So you go back and you do 2 masters. No,
partway. I finished off one, and the other one's just part way through.
So have you finished the?
I've done the theoretical biology one,
and you've still got the
philosophy one.
What are you looking? What are you looking at for the philosophy one? Like, what's your central question?
My thing's philosophy of consciousness to do with things like the aesthetic experience, as in how our senses format reality that comes in, and how we interpret it. So especially influenced by Kant's theories of mind and consciousness.
And so theoretical biology, you've probably been asked this again many times, but I'm very interested. Different to biology, how?
You don't have to kill animals. which is one thing I really like.
You have to kill animals in biology? I guess you do, to examine them, don't you?
Yep.
To find out how they tick.
Yeah, there's a bit of carnage that goes on. So also...
It's vegetarian biology, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, the thing I like about theoretical biology is all the limitations are in my own head and my own responsibility, whereas if you're working with animals, they never perform, they never behave. If you're working like in molecular biology, you might have contamination that comes through from reagents. Yeah. So you might spend weeks just trying to work out particular problems and then find out that chemicals you've been sent from the supplier are wrong, and it's just really, really repetitious a lot of the time, especially genetic engineering sides of things. So for me, I like to work in my own head and move around in there.
And so what did you look at for your masters? And by the way, that sounds very much like the entertainment industry. You'd never work with children or animals, they say, don't they? It's the same in the biology racket. So what did you look at for your theoretical biology masters?
So what I did was I started off, so linked into philosophy quite closely, I started off from Kant's third critique of judgment, and I looked at how humans form concepts of organisms. Yeah. And
how humans form concepts of organisms.
Yeah. To even discuss them or describe them.
Right.
And so we do two primary forms of explanation. One's teleological, which is an end story. So say the function of the hand is to pick up a glass.
Yep.
Okay. And the other one's mechanistic, which is to construct everything, the whole from the parts, just like, a Lego thing or mechanic, like a machine.
This is how we describe stuff to each other.
And how we innately think about organisms.
Okay, yep.
Okay, so the teleological problem...
So hang on, with the second one, I want to make sure I understand this right. With the second one, I view you in that regard as what, a skeleton with...
all the parts,
skin
so like
over
heart is separate from brain.
Yeah, gotcha.
So, and it reduces it all down to component parts and talks about it like that. So that's got fundamental problems, the mechanistic explanation, in that it misses essential aspects of organisms. They seem to all be totally interconnected.
You mean as a whole?
As a whole.
Biosphere as a whole.
Yeah, as a whole, organisms and also environment.
Yeah.
So that runs into some fundamental conceptual problems or philosophical problems. And on the teleological thing, to have an end story to say the function of the hand is to pick up something, well, that means that it had an end goal. Yeah. And unless you're going to incorporate something like God into it, you can't do that. So
why can't you incorporate what? Well, hang on, you're losing me here. Why can't you have that end goal without incorporating a God?
Well,
there's no God in me picking this up.
No, but to say the function of the hand, hand is designed to pick something up, as you see commonly. Okay.
Yeah.
People say, the purpose of the heart is to pump blood.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually have a purpose; it just does. So you've got to change these whole things because if you've got a design-based concept,
that's more like a what's the word? Is it semantics, or it's more like a language?
But that's what. That's how you interact with the world, is through language.
Yeah, it's
We're
true.
imprisoned in a house of language.
Yeah. Did you touch on that in the Masters?
That's what I went into that and showed that the teleological explanatory form has problems, as does the mechanistic one. Yeah. And then Kant did some interesting work to show that organisms obviously partake of some other form of causality.
Yeah.
And so I hunted around from that. I opened that whole aspect of his work out and showed there's other non-mechanistic, non-teleological ways of discussing phenomena, which is all based around a thing called Lagrangian mathematics.
And so you came to this conclusion as to this third way of describing things, but based on a branch of mathematics that you found.
Yeah, so philosophically.
Obviously all postgrad work should break new ground, but that was the new ground you broke. You were like, here's this third way.
And then gave examples of where these things can be described in biology. For example, DNA replication forks, neural impulses.
Relates to a type of mathematics called teleological that originally weren't applied to biology. Is that right?
So extremal principles, basically, so what I came up with was that organisms operate under extremal principles. Yeah. They fall into their natural form as a highest or lowest energy state. Yeah. And I just showed the parallels with what was going on in physics with what's going on in the actual biology. So, through the lens of developmental biology and, morphogenesis.
So that sounds to me like almost a PhD level of work. Was that just contained within a year?
Yeah, I was a maniac. I did. That's the
Still mastering every day?
Yeah, I was still working full time
really?
while I was doing it.
Really? So you're just doing it over all night and in the weekends?
Yeah.
Big girly swat?
Yeah.
But I seriously think, based on what I've learned from, what's required for a master's or PhD level postgrad work, that does sound like it's veering over. Did you think about doing that thing where you continue on with the study and effectively turn your master's into a doctorate?
Yeah, I think I might have got asked to, but I didn't for one reason. The supervisor was going over to Australia as well.
Because obviously it's an amazing achievement, don't get me wrong, but I asked this because I read somewhere today that it's still in the back of your mind to do a doctorate one day.
Yeah, I've got a PhD scholarship anyway.
Great. I did too. I wouldn't have done it otherwise.
Yeah. So it's just, getting onto that. We also had a child, which...
Hey, I'm not saying where is it?
So, but I published a chapter in a book called Origins of Design and Nature, which came out on Springer, which was a book in physics and complexity and philosophy.
Could you see yourself down the track, working in academia in your later years?
Yeah.
Well, then, as you already know, I'm preaching to the choir, but getting something like a book chapter is a pretty good publication, man, in terms of the bizarre way we measure our tertiary value now through government funding.
Yeah.
You've got to be published to get work these days. That's why you're doing it. Oh, that's interesting. So you could see down the track. I was thinking the move from where you are and what you're doing to that would be quite different for you with teaching and so on.
Yeah, but equally you can just... the thing is, a lot of my favourite academics have always been, they sort of pop into the university system and then go and do their own thing.
Yeah.
And I do like that. Doing what I do also gives me the freedom to do that and have my own time as I did when I was doing a master's thesis. So it depends, because there's a lot of
Did you do it through Auckland?
Massey.
Yeah.
Because often, like my friends who are lecturers as well, they have 2 days they're supposed to spend on doing lessons, and they get 2 days of doing research and 1 day of doing stuff for the university. So they're really only getting 2 days a week. Yeah. So comparatively, you can do that in many ways. And I've got an adjunct place at the Department of Evolution at Griffith anyway. So
I saw that today. What is it?
It just means...
What's the word? Disjunct?
Adjunct.
Adjunct.
It just means I get access to various parts of the resources, and I work with them and one of the labs. Really? You are
right, Chris. It's a good observation in that I'm not on a research contract yet. I'm on a teaching contract, but when I think they said something like for PBRF reasons, you need a minimum of 2 publications a year or whatever it was. I'm like, man, that's bugger all. But once you've got marking and admin and service, as you say, to the uni, and it adds up. It adds up to a lot of stuff to get done. Probably close off talking a little more about music. From the point of view of, because home productions become so ubiquitous now, and so many people are able to put the ideas in their head to fruition, which is great. What are some sort of common errors you see people making, or what's a great? What do you have any tips and techniques for the bedroom producer?
Yep, definitely.
Good. I thought I was going to draw a blank on that one.
No, totally. I've always got heaps of opinions to make it easier, having done all the mistakes.
Are you tweeting or Facebooking?
I'm just organising for my son to get picked up because...
Thanks for giving up your time today,
traffic,
by the way.
I don't know if I'm going to make it... wait a second.
Hey, we've got 5 minutes to go, dude. So if you need to get out of here now, we can
we'll do this.
5 minutes. Give me
we've
5
got
minutes.
people at the studio that can look after the new
4
baby.
minutes.
Okay. First problem that most people have in home production type thing is they don't use references.
Yep.
So get reference tracks compared to the best. That's what we did with COG all the way from the beginning, and just keep on working up. You won't hear half the stuff that they do in it when you're starting off, but you'll eventually hear more and more. And if you've got a reference of what to do on how loud the bass or the vocals or the hi-hat should be.
No,
Just
I've never
reference
done
standards.
that. I have never done that.
That's number one. Second one is sorting out your bass in your room, which is the hardest part of any room treatment because it goes all over the place. And if you can't accurately deal with your bass, especially in most modern styles, you're in big problems.
I've heard people shouldn't produce with a sub in the room. Is that true?
Well, it depends. If your room's got $20,000 worth of treatment, go for it.
Okay.
But in general, subs can create a lot of problems. If your wall's thin, then a lot of the bass is going to go through it. But
so what do you mean treating your room for bass? So if you don't treat your room for bass, what do you mean it bounces around? And so you think it sounds this particular way in your room, and then you bring it to you at COG, and it sounds completely different.
Think of sound like water and waves.
Yeah.
And it just bounces off one wall and the rest, and they phase double or cancel out.
Oh, suddenly I've got so many questions to ask you, because another one I've thought about.
I always recommend people to get a sub pack, because that takes the room out of the equation.
What's a sub pack?
They're basically a sub transducer that sits on the back of your seat or your back. And because most of your sub 300 receptors, these three different types, are actually in your torso, your thorax.
Oh, I know that one.
Yeah, rather than in your ears. So just put the sub transducer on your back. We've got one. I mean, we've got some of the best speakers in New Zealand, but I'm still happy to use one of these because it's fun as well.
So you sit there, and is it even emitting a tone or just a
It emits the sub. It does what a normal sub would do, but it goes straight into your back rather than into the room.
Because the other one I ask is monitoring. Is I've learnt this. I got quite into it. I hadn't really touched things for about 10 years now, but I still teach a lot of audio-based stuff at AUT. So I've sort of come back into the knowledge side of it that way. It's been really cool reacquainting. And I noticed that students, and I've started encouraging them to try and find some speakers to listen to their documentaries on before they hand them in. Do you find that a lot of music mixed or made just on headphones is extraordinarily problematic once it reaches you?
Not if they do reference tracks.
Not if they do reference tracks through the headphones as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a direct
I
correlation.
need a reference documentary. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a direct correlation between how good mixes are and whether people use reference tracks or not.
So it's not the using of the headphones, it's the not having something to reference to. So it's reference tracks 10 times. I'm going to start using reference tracks.
Yeah, there's a good piece of software or plugin called Sample Magic AB, that you can load your reference tracks in and level match them all, and you're away. I use it all the time.
Sample Magic AB. Now, this academic you spoke of, is it Kantz? Have I got that?
Kant? The philosopher you're talking about?
Yes.
K-A-N-T, no Z.
No Z. Okay. Just before you go, speaking of philosophers and thinkers, you were quoted as the most significant thinkers of the 20th century with the KLF.
Good.
No, that's what you said. And so where does that come from, to close us on up? They burnt £1 million.
I reckon they pretended to burn £1 million because they're that clever.
It would make sense. It's a pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, because then they're in on their joke. Yeah. Even more.
So where do you get the performance musician side of things? Where do you get the have you read stuff by what's his name?
Jim Corty?
Yeah.
Just their book, How to Have a Number One Hit the Easy Way, works. I did it. They understood the actual deep structure.
You
archetypes.
read that book and then went and got a number one hit.
Yeah. So they see the big picture and they know how to do it, and they take the piss out of it, but they actually understand music as at the moment that it hits people's ears and goes into their brain and gives that experience, and they know how to do it.
Wow.
So to deliver that accurately, consistently as they have, and still be taking the piss that much.
And what have they done since?
So they've done a lot of art exhibitions. I mean, they just stepped out because they wanted to have a rest. They're just going to reform, though, from memory.
Yeah, the Time Lords as well. It was a bizarre period of time. Thanks. It's been such a pleasure, and I really appreciate it. I didn't realise you were driving out here today just to do this. So thanks for giving up your time, Chris.
All good.
It's been interesting.